Once again, that's the flag of Argentina. And circular argument. I hate it when people say it's a circular. You can't use the Bible to prove the existence of Jesus. This is taking the belief that fundamentalists have that the Bible came down as dictation from God, like the Quran, and that there's nothing flawed in any of the Gospels. It's not like we have 4 Gospels that are according to different people and that they conflict in certain areas and get things out of order, kind of like if 4 different people witnessed a car accident. I know that there's evangelicals that use this argument, but they don't really believe it because they believe all those 4 people that witnessed a car accident, every single thing they said was true or really happened. Well, no, people make mistakes, right? We have 2 of the Gospels that start out with Christ's baptism. So I believe John is earlier than the evangelicals really want to put John last, but Mark and John have no knowledge of this virgin birth, right? They don't have knowledge of any type of Mariology. John doesn't even have a concept of 12 apostles. But let's go through the earliest writing of evidence for Christ, basically. Outside of polygraphy, outside of archaeology. So some of the stuff is going to be included in the Western canon of Scripture that gets called the New Testament. Gospel according to Mark, AD 30 to 69. The authentic Pauline letters, 50 to 69. The Epistle of James, AD 50 to 69. Gospel of Matthew, AD 50 to 80. Gospel of Luke, AD 60 to 80. I put that because Luke, I believe, has to be later than Matthew because Luke is responding to Matthew. Luke is a counter to Matthew, if you guys did get that already. And this video is mainly for atheists and anti-theists. John, I have 2 sets of dates here, either 40 to 60 or 60 to 90. I think 40 to 60 is more likely. The Didache, AD 50, the range of dates I put AD 50 to 120, which is the latest that anybody will put it. I don't think anybody believes that it's outside of the 1st century. You know, even if they put it late, they'll put it at like 90 or 60 or 90 or 80 or something like that. But only the most wild people will put it at. I think it's mainly the Protestants that really want to push the Didache, out, but they can't get it so far because one of the earliest manuscripts that we have, first, the earliest manuscript that we have mentioning the virgin birth is actually from the Proto-Evangelium of James, and the Didache is one of the oldest manuscripts that we have from, not the New Testament, but of Christian writings. First Peter is circa 80, First John circa 80, and I'm going to include 2nd and 3rd John with that too. First Timothy, 2nd Timothy, and Titus, AD 80 to 90, if not earlier, but I don't group them in with the authentic Pauline epistles. The Epistle of Barnabas, which should be in the canon, AD 60 to 90. I'm going to err on the earlier date and say 60. First Clement, AD 82. I mean, we know the date of that, 82. The Apocalypse of John had to be between AD 54 and AD 68. Papias, 80 to 100. I mean, he's crazy early. Ignatius of Antioch, we have a short window for him, which is 105 to 115, or AD 105 to 115. The Shepherd of Hermas, 90 to 110. Although I think the Shepherd of Hermas is probably earlier than that. It's probably from the late 70s, early 80s. Pliny the Younger, AD 111 to 112. We have an exact date for him, and he's an enemy. He's a persecutor of Christians. You should read some of Pliny's stuff. It'll piss. He's an asshole. He's writing to Trajan and back. Then Suetonius, 115. Tacitus, another son of a bitch, he was writing in 115. Polycarp, 83 to 130. Josephus, another exact date, 93. Hebrews, a book that I despise, 50 to 95. Odd that it would get such an... Scholars would put such an early date on that. Marabar Serapion, AD 73 to 80. I think it's probably earlier than that. I think it's probably late 30s because of what he mentions. I mean, read it, you know. It might even have been written while Jesus is still alive, because he talks about there's this king that's going to be executed. Or maybe he was just executed. That's what this apocalyptic preacher we remember as Jesus Christ stand out, is that he didn't come right out and claim messiahship or anything like that, but he was being accused of being the king of the Jews, which is different than these Messiah, the people who were claiming to be the Messiah, who were priests who labeled themselves as the original Moses head priest restored, or Aaronic original Aaron restored, or you know, things like that, or they are Elijah come back, you know, which is why John, I think it's in John, the returning of Elijah, shoehorned in that was John the Baptist. Then again, you could say that the return of Elijah in Malachi is tacked on, because it's in, the whole book is in, I think, Aramaic, and that's tacked on in Hebrew, or the whole thing's in Hebrew and that's tacked on in Aramaic. So whatever you want to do with that. Justin Martyr, 135 to 160. Tatian, circa 140. Marcion, AD 85 to 160. I don't know about that. I would say 150 or 140 was him, and put him, probably was born earlier. We know his father was a priest. Again, priests could get married. That was just something in the West. I mean, still, Eastern Orthodox churches and Oriental Orthodox churches, it's almost a requirement that you're married to be a priest. Valentinus, 100 to 160. I like the fact that they have that, because I don't like Gnosticism very much. The Papyrus Oxyrhynchus, 1224. What is the date for that? I didn't see a date on that one. It's crazy early, because we have no clue. Like, it's from a gospel, right? And it's labeled, you know, the Oxyrhynchus 1224 gospel. Yeah, 80, 50 to 140. That's a pretty wide date. And the 140 is probably incorrect. It's probably earlier. but that's all we just have a piece of it. That's it. The Rylands Papyrus, P52, is very interesting because it's about the size of a credit card. And it's amazing what it has on it. So it's about the size of, let me get something that's inconsequential that I don't, doesn't have a lot of personal information on it. Okay, it's about this size, right? And it's got writing on the front and the back. And it's the Gospel of John on the front and back. And the funny thing is that, so it was a page out of a book that got withered away. Funny thing is it matches up with majority text today. And it comes from, I believe it dates to 115 or 105, something ludicrous. Some put it at I heard someone put it at 125 or 135, but that's just ludicrous. The minimalists are ludicrous on that. It's like 105 to 115. But the writings of the early church fathers like Clement and Ignatius of Antioch and Papias, the Protestants don't like that. Papias especially. Papias only survives in fragments of Remembered by Eusebius because what he says is so embarrassing to the official record. Basically, he talks about Judas being crushed between two carts, and something that's been suspected for a long time, that Peter had a hand in Mark, and I truly believe that. I don't believe 1st or 2nd Peter was written by Peter at all. I think it's clear that neither of those books were written by Peter. But the Gospel of Mark seems to have an eyewitness account in there. There's 1/3 of it's really old and is the Passion narrative, and then the first 2/3 is, I counted 26 immediately in the first chapter, is just kind of tacked on. So and they even say the Passion narrative, like when, and scholars talk about it, and label it in the 30s, right? And then they date the complete Mark at 65. So I don't understand why I used extra biblical sources and even things like Pliny and Tacitus and Suetonius for the existence of Jesus, but why would using works from that 300, 400 years later would become part of a codex that would be called the New Testament? How is it a circular argument by saying, well, I'm going to use the Gospel of Luke as evidence and the Epistle of James as evidence and the Gospel of Mark as evidence and the Gospel of John as evidence? How is that a circular argument? You're using the Bible to prove the Bible. No, I'm using the Bible to prove Jesus, or parts of what would become the Western canon, because, or at least one, you have Protestant canon, the Roman Catholic canon, and then you have the Eastern Orthodox canon. There's multiples of those. But yeah, so circular argument, how the hell is it a circular argument? So if a library says, all right, we're going to put every piece of literature that we have together and put it in one book. Oh, you can't use any of those nonfiction works as to do your research because that's a circular argument. It's just ridiculous. So how is it a circular argument using works that are now found in the New Testament? They were written by people, sometimes at odds. I mean, Luke was written as a response, as a spite to Matthew. It uses Mark as a template and draws from Q, but is giving the finger to Matthew.